You ever think about the magic of the phrase, because I said so? Anyone challenges you on anything and they ask for any sort of externalized reason, animation, continuity play. Can you tell me why you're doing what you're doing? Can you relate it to the outside world? No, because I said so. And as much as there's some sort of surreal executive power and identity, there's also a lot of foolishness and conflict that comes from it. And part of what Chapter 5 is trying to frame is this notion of meaning, identity, and time. And they kind of go over models that emphasize identity, they emphasize meaning, but the whole magic of the integral theory is you can, when you see both with respect to time, then you get this notion of development of a given object of inquiry and how it has phase changes over time and how what happens, right? So I'm recircling chapter 5 before I go into Keegan's hidden curriculum model, which the book goes down. I'm just going to recircle and do a little recap, mostly for my own understanding because I want to feel confident in these ideas. So I'm starting this episode with this notion of hatching, which was developed by Margaret Mahler. It was well known in the four stages of psychoanalysis. She was mostly interested in when children developed a sense of self, and she observed this phenomena called hatching. It's when the infant begins to experience her blanket or her mother's breast as something other. So we start as little organism babes in this oceanic, undecipherable thingamajig where we get signals of some sort, but there isn't a hard, concrete boundary of you and other. And hatching is when this first ability to distinguish on a physiological level boundaries exists. And as I mentioned before, the whole brouhaha of integral theory is it takes the construction of identity and what that creates in terms of a background foreground relationship with your environment, and you overlay that or you preserve snapshots over time. And I mentioned constructive developmentalism before, but I really wanted to kind of anchor down what that implies. And it's basically you can take the study of cognition from the first person perspective, how we look out into the world versus the study of what that outlook feeds back into ourselves, our emotional relationships, or our emotional inwardness and affect that affects motivations. And it segments those things over time. And that's the whole notion of constructive developmentalism. It's that these objects, these notions of cognition and emotional perspective have developmental stages over time. So here's my recap attempt. So, chapter 5, in the upper left perspective with respect to conflict, is an emphasis on the aspect of conflict that is about the meaning of identity, meaning making. So, it's about origin stories, the stories that tell who we are and explain why we do what we do, and how those origin stories and primary motivations can cause drama in the open world. Yeah. Okay. So the big anchoring thing is this notion of, I forgot. Check it out. Check me out. Constructive developmentalism, which is to say that any inward motive inquiry, those models are there. I mean, and this book kind of goes over them one by one. But the whole thing the integral theory tries to do is unto the quadrants, you can see how these different phase changes in between different domains and different orientations of experience create better ways to understand individuals and systems in relations to individuals and systems. Hopefully, hopefully I'll be able to make those ideas a little bit more charismatic. But I think I'm getting a nice expressive intuition, which I like. Very nice. So here's the outro music now. It's funny, as I work on these other projects that will come into play and will cause the next evolution of these video experiences. But until then, this is just pretty much me talking to myself about the things I read with like weird outro and intro music. But hey, stay engaged. I'm gonna do the outro again.